The blizzard of '93 was a generational storm.
Right now on the National Weather Desk, a special look back at the storm of the century.
It was like a snow hurricane.
I have never seen anything like this. Visibility, I'd say right now, is 20, 30 yards max.
Things aren't getting any better. Actually, they are getting worse.
One of the largest winter storms in U.S. history stretched from Maine to the Gulf of Mexico.
Whatever could go wrong went wrong.
We don't have any heat, any hot water.
You couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of you.
This is actually one of the smaller drifts.
We'll look back at how local stations covered the storm and speak with meteorologists about its lasting impact 30 years later.
We knew this was going to be a big one.
I was actually scared. I was afraid. I was fearful.
It was one for the ages, and it was one this old weather warrior will never forget.
You are watching a special edition of the National Weather Desk, the blizzard of '93, one for the history books.
And good morning and welcome to the special edition of the National Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Brian Vandegraff. We're turning back the clock and revisiting the blizzard of 1993, also known as the storm of the century. We'll look at the impact and how it was covered on newscasts from Alabama all the way north to Maine and its lasting legacy. 30 years ago today, the blizzard blasted the east with heavy snow and powerful winds. Florida saw deadly tornadoes, but it was the massive size of the storm impacting more than 120 million people that made it so memorable from the Gulf Coast all the way to New England. Check out some of these snow totals. 43 inches in Syracuse, 24 in Pittsburgh, 60 across portions of Tennessee, 50 in North Carolina, even Birmingham, Alabama had 17 inches of the white stuff, and down in Greenville, South Carolina, they picked up 10. Now, by the numbers, at least 270 deaths are attributed to the storm. Some estimates are over 300, and it caused $5.5 billion in damage across 22 states, which is nearly $11 billion in current day dollar amounts. This makes it the second costliest winter storm in U.S. history. Communities in the storm's path came to a halt, and this was especially true where people weren't used to seeing so much snow. One of those cities was Asheville, North Carolina. Jay Siltzer takes us back to March of 1993.
And this is what you're waking up to this morning, a monstrous winter storm.
30 years ago, a winter blast like no other paralyzed the mountains.
This storm has produced record low barometric pressure. It has produced record high winds along the Gulf and the Atlantic coast.
It was like a snow hurricane snow. It had that speed.
You couldn't get all the snow off the parking lots or the roads into the shelters. You couldn't get a shelter staff into the shelters. And it was just really, whatever could go wrong went wrong.
Trees fell.
Hundreds upon hundreds of trees are down here.
Grocery stores emptied.
The whole town is out of water.
And water had to be trucked in.
God, we don't have any heat, any hot water.
Some emergency dispatchers relied on lanterns with power out and temperatures falling.
Only about 50% of the people here have phone service.
Let's go now to Gary Stevenson with the latest. Gary, quite the winter storm system working up out there.
Brenda, this will be one to remember and probably go down in the record books.
The blizzard of '93 did go down in the record books. 18 inches of snow fell at the Asheville Regional Airport in a 48-hour period spanning March 12th and 13th. That had never happened previously, and it hasn't happened since.
I spent 47 years with the county, but that was the worst disaster emergency that I could ever remember, even growing up here. Nothing like that.
We hiked through at least a foot, 2 feet of snow.
Stranded student hikers escaped with their lives after being airlifted from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
This parking lot was the scene of a huge celebration as the last group of hikers missing from that Michigan group were brought in.
Cheryl Barber covered the story. Now retired, he reflected recently on the search and outcome.
When they got off the helicopter, they ran to their parents, and they were greeted with open arms, and it was just a tear-jerking moment.
When it comes to local television meteorologists, few are as well respected and well known as Alabama's James Spann. He was on the air in Birmingham during the blizzard, and we asked him to talk about how this historic storm impacted his home state.
The blizzard of '93 was a generational storm. Officially in Birmingham, Alabama, we had 13 inches, but that was a little misleading. Parts of the city had 20 inches. and we had snow drifts 5 to 6 feet. We had convective snow with thunder and lightning, and we had hurricane-force winds on the ridges, winds of 75 miles an hour or higher. And it shut this place down for days. It was really a humanitarian crisis. People could not get medical help that needed medical help. They couldn't get to a hospital. First responders had a hard time making their runs. It was a very chaotic weekend. And at one point, we had about 500,000 people just in my state alone that had no power. And the Sunday morning after the snow stopped on a Saturday morning. The next morning, it dropped to 2 degrees in Birmingham, coldest March temperature ever. And that kind of cold is dangerous in the southern United States. We don't get that kind of cold that often. And it was finally the week after that. We started to see 60s again. The snow started to melt. And it was forecast pretty well, but people didn't listen, and I don't blame them. To go on television in the middle of March and say, we're going to get a snow here of 6 to 16 inches. That's what my graphic said, a big graphic, 6 to 16 inches.
Accumulations in the Birmingham area between 6 and 8 inches. Anywhere from Birmingham north and east, we could see 6 to 16 inches of snow, and that could lead to some downed trees and maybe some power outages. This will be the storm of the century, perhaps.
I don't blame them for not believing that. But the forecast verified, and quite frankly, our forecast totals were too low. It outperformed that. But it was a generational event, and it's going to be, it was one for the ages. The next time we have an event like the blizzard of '93, I'll be long gone. But we have to learn from it and do better in messaging and communicating the urgency of the situation next time an event like that happens. And I think it's easier today because of the different platforms we have to do that. But it was one for the ages, and it was one this old weather warrior will never forget.
So just how big was the storm? Well, the National Weather Service's Office of Hydrology estimates the water output was comparable to about 40 days' flow on the Mississippi River at New Orleans. Meteorologist Matt Ritter is here now with a look at how the storm all came together.
Yeah, Brian, it was a late-season Arctic air outbreak going down the middle of the country, and the jet stream with the disturbance riding that, it phased. It combined with the disturbance in the subtropical branch of the jet stream. And, of course, that was near the Gulf of Mexico. So all this cold, dry air interacting with all that warm, humid air led to a very strong deepening of low pressure. And, of course, that was the storm. As it moved up the eastern coast, it did what it did. And it was just huge. And there we see the GOES 7 from 1993 satellite image as it moved up the eastern seaboard. Absolutely amazing storm, and it was absolutely amazing how well forecast it was by the primitive computer models by comparison to compare to what we have today. Brian?
Interesting stuff there. Well, listen, the storm hit Pennsylvania hard, too. In fact, more than 2 feet fell in Pittsburgh. 20 inches piled up in Harrisburg, and keeping roads clear, well, it was a challenge.
PennDOT's heavy-duty machinery and snowplows that are as tall as I am can only do so much in fighting a storm of this magnitude. The culprit really isn't the snow, but it's the fierce wind that has turned this storm into a blinding one. The whiteout makes it difficult to plow. You can't see what is coming your way until it zooms by. Snowplowers' word of advice to motorists is stay out of the way.
Please just stay back behind us and let us do our job. We make the roads a little bit safer for them.
When we got on 81, it just was unbearable. You couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of you. And there was cars everywhere on the roads, and there's a bunch of trucks upside down, and so we decided to pull off.
A total of 49 deaths in Pennsylvania are attributed to the blizzard. Harrisburg meteorologist Steve Knight remembers it was the one time he was actually scared during a storm.
We call it a snowicane, but it was hurricane force winds, and then with snowfall rates of 1 to 2 inches per hour. There were times when, we all kind of looked at each other and went, wow, like this is the real deal. It was the one time in my life where I went through a weather event and I was actually scared. I was afraid. I was fearful.
Back in 1993, it was clear the blizzard was an historic event to remember, and some entrepreneurs saw an opportunity. This Pennsylvania business sold I Survived the Blizzard of '93 t-shirts and hats. Did you own one? Interestingly enough, we found several different versions of I Survived the Blizzard shirts still for sale on Amazon and eBay, among other sites. Well, the special edition of the National Weather Desk is taking a quick break, but when we come back, more from the blizzard of '93.
A powerful nor'easter will really get going as we head through the daytime today and then continuing Monday night, starting as rain down towards southern New England, snow up towards northern New England, and this snow line will slowly sink down to the south, and we are going to see this transition over to snow for most areas by the time we get to Monday night and Tuesday. This continues into early on Wednesday as well. Snowfall-wise, we could see some very high accumulations, 1 to 2 feet in some parts of southern New England, a little less up to the north.
I'm meteorologist Jonathan Myers, and here's a look at the mid-Atlantic region. On and off cold rain to start your day on Monday in the mid-Atlantic region. It looks like a wet day overall up and down the 95 corridor through lunch, through 2:30, and through about 4 or 5 o'clock as you're headed home on the commute from work, especially eastern portions of the area as a coastal system gets going and then gradually begins to haul off to the north and east. Highs only in the 40s to near 50. That's the scene here.
I'm meteorologist Vetus Reed. Here's a look at your forecast highs for the day. We're going to see a cool one up in Nashville, 48 degrees, Raleigh 57, 56 in Atlanta, 60s in Pensacola, Jacksonville 72 degrees. Still holding hot down in West Palm, 89 degrees, 79 in Tampa. Cold front will continue to push south. Looks like a few showers and thunderstorms along that front. Afternoon showers in South Florida, but plenty of clear skies as we see high pressure push across the southeast. Looks like it'll bring in just a little bit mild temperatures.
The blizzard of '93, one for the history books.
Well, as we've noted, the snowfall was heaviest inland. Cities along the I-95 corridor, like New York and Washington, had less snow because sleet mixed in with some of that snow. In fact, here in D.C. at Reagan National Airport, only recorded 6.5 inches. Just off to the west out towards Dulles Airport, nearly 14 inches. Still, the storm was incredibly impactful. Schools were closed for days. Strong winds blew snow around the streets, and cold weather turned anything wet into ice. Meteorologist Veronica Johnson, now chief meteorologist at WJLA here in Washington, was working in New York City 30 years ago.
Blizzard of '93 was the first major winter storm of my career. I was working at WABC TV in New York City, and I remember talking about the forecast with meteorologist Sam Champion 2 days prior to the big storm, and then 24 hours before the storm hit. We knew this was going to be a big one by what was happening down in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina.
Just know that it will get worse this afternoon. Don't look out the window now and think that it's going to be okay, because it's not going to be. You need to settle in right now. You've had time to make your plans. Settle in and stay with us.
They were getting heavy snow. They were getting hammered with some high winds. And we knew that we probably were going to get similar. What I didn't know, though, is when I went into work the morning of March 14th, that I was not going to get home. It snowed and it snowed and it snowed. And then that snow started blowing around. And it was a full-on blizzard. Times Square was unrecognizable. More than 20 inches of snow later. So New York, New Jersey, all declared states of emergency. They closed the New Jersey Turnpike. So absolutely, I wasn't going to make it home to Edison, New Jersey that day. What I wound up doing was going around the corner to a movie theater. I bought a ticket. I can't recall the movie, but I know I got 3 good hours of shut-eye, and it was nice and warm in that movie theater.
Good story there. Syracuse, New York is one of the snowiest cities in the country, averaging over 100 inches a year. But even there, the blizzard, 43 inches of snow fell. It was a pretty big deal. Here's a sampling of how the storm was covered that day.
Like tanks to battle, the plows kept moving undermanned against the raging storm. This was Route 81 northbound at 5:30 in the morning, also closed up. The tread mark's about the only sign where our camera was.
Looking at moderate blowing snow, and the winds are really fierce out here. The wind chills are down. I am really cold out here. And you can see that this is actually one of the smaller drifts. Behind me, 7 and 8 foot drifts.
Welcome to Hobart Avenue. The people who live on this dead-end street in Syracuse say they've been waiting for 3 days for a snowplow to show up. So the neighbors banded together and have taken it upon themselves to clear their own street. It's hard, back-breaking work, and they're not happy with the Syracuse DPW.
We pay enough taxes here. All the other streets around us are done.
Negotiating the side roads remains a challenge. Many cars still buried under heaps of snow as special equipment is brought in to chew a path down narrow streets. All the while, people shoveling and shoveling to dig themselves out, only to see their work destroyed in a blast.
Well, you know, I felt like pelting him with snowballs, but I let him go by. He's just doing his job.
Southern states were hit hard, too. In Georgia, temperatures quickly dropped from the upper 70s to below freezing. 3 million customers lost power. Atlanta had more than 4 inches of snow and was paralyzed for days. A little less fell in Macon. Coastal cities also battled the storm. Meteorologist Ed Petrowski remembers the pounding along the South Carolina coast.
The storm of the century in 1993 was a very powerful storm. It produced wind gusts to hurricane force across the Carolinas, even a peak wind gust in Myrtle Beach of 90 miles per hour. That's higher than any hurricane that has hit our coast in nearly 30 years. Also extraordinary was all the cold air that followed the system as it was departing our area. Temperatures dropped from the 60s into the 20s and 30s, and precipitation changed from rain to snow. We had a dusting of snow along the Carolina coast, and in the mountains of North Carolina, Mount Mitchell recorded 4 feet of snow.
More than a foot of snow did fall on portions of southwestern Virginia. Roanoke had 16 inches, while west of the Blue Ridge Mountains topped at about 20. Several area roofs collapsed, including a sports arena and a local hardware store. It was a similar scene in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Stay inside. Do not go outside if at all possible.
You can see through the parking lot the wind is definitely blowing. The snow is falling. It doesn't seem like it's really letting up any to me, actually.
This guy has tried again and again to make it up that hill. We talked to him a little bit earlier. He has been here since 4 o'clock in the morning and cannot get up the speed to get off, and I guess he chooses not to try to use the off-ramp because that's not much better with the snow drifts.
Countless cars left behind by their drivers. Automobiles stalled and drifts several feet deep.
Our Emily Gracie spoke with meteorologist David Glenn about the storm's impact on Chattanooga.
I remember the forecast being a little tough, and it's not for the reasons synoptically or from a computer model standpoint. It was because it was early to mid-March. Temperatures were in the 70s, and everybody's already thinking spring. They moved along from winter, and now as the storm started building up, you could see it early in the week on the models. I think a lot of people take it with a grain of salt, but eventually, as the day goes by and the message continues, everyone got the message, understood it was going to be something unique.
There was a blizzard watch issued for Georgia in March. Is this something that ever happened before?
Not that I can remember. Something that really got your attention because you can start understanding the scope of what you're dealing with a storm like this moving in. The total drifts we had here in Chattanooga were around 2 to 3 feet, which is never before seen around here.
What was it like to drive in that?
It was something I'll never forget. I had an old Jeep Grand Wagoneer at the time, and I loved that thing. It had high clearance, and I found myself going down the middle of the road. It took a longer than usual time, about a couple of hours that would normally take about 15 minutes.
What's it like to cover this thing at the station?
We just basically kept a 24-hour scenario going as long as we could. A lot of the city was losing power. And in fact, our station lost power. We had to do our newscast outside. So I had an old map from the 1970s and a marker, and I had to draw the weather as you would, back from 20 years prior to provide the forecast. But it was so cold. It was a 6 o'clock newscast. Temperatures were in the teens. You're standing there in the snow up to your knees. But that is one evening newscast I will never forget, and I'm still shivering thinking about that one.
As a meteorologist, as a forecaster, what did you learn from this?
I learned that anything is possible. And people ask me, could this happen again? And I often say, well, if all the ingredients came together at least one time in history, it's bound to happen again.
New England escaped the worst of the storm. Only 18 inches fell in Portland, Maine, with about 10 inches in Providence, Rhode Island. The cities were prepared for much more.
blowing snow, drifting snow, and very poor visibilities will make any kind of travel absurd.
These are the driving conditions in the northern part of Rhode Island tonight. Roads are completely snow-covered with whiteout conditions.
There were fears there could be lots of damage, that the storm could be more severe than Hurricane Bob or the no-name Atlantic storm from October 1991. But the near-hurricane force winds died down before high tide, and that made a big difference.
In 72, it was 30 below zero over here, you know, so it's no problem.
We were very lucky, a little bit of minor flooding, but nothing like we've seen in the past.
California is feeling the same way this morning and still ahead on the National Weather Desk. A look at where things stand following a weekend of rain, floods, and snowfall.
Well, a very good Monday morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Andrew Buck-Michael taking a look at your weather story across the Midwest for the day today. We do have some snow showers across the Great Lakes, but the plains looking at some sunshine coming out for the day today and a little chilly. More sun across most of the area for the day tomorrow as that light snow continues to move off towards New England. But temperatures Tuesday on the cool side for us as we head on into your Wednesday. Still pretty quiet weather for most of the Midwest, but we will start to get a little bit more active by the end of the week.
Good morning. I'm meteorologist Rebecca Stevenson. Here's what's happening across the West. We have cooler air working its way back into the Pacific Northwest as a cold front's bringing back the rainfall. So as temperatures cool for the Washington and Oregon area, the snow levels fall. Yes, more mountain snow across the West, even into the interior West. But we're going to see the threat of flooding as we get into later tonight for the California area, especially along the coastline as the heavy rain continues. That's the scene from here.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
We've been remembering the blizzard of 1993, but California saw some pretty intense weather over the weekend, and millions still remain under flood watches across the state. Flooding and rain wreaked havoc, prompting evacuation orders and warnings as officials begged motorists to stay off deluged highways. This video shows responders using a helicopter to rescue a man trapped by rising floodwaters from the Salinas River on Saturday. Authorities said the man was driving when he got swept away, but he was able to get onto an island in the middle of the river. Luckily, he was not injured. The Salinas River is continuing to rise and evacuation orders are still in place. And check this out. An Amtrak passenger took this video as he and his daughter traveled from Vancouver to Los Angeles. The train moved through hard-hit Monterey County near the Pajaro River that jumped its banks and punched a hole in a levee. It unleashed a torrent of water, leaving only the tops of some vehicles visible. And it's not over just yet for the state. Another onslaught of rain and snow could pummel the region through tonight. The weather does not appear to be quite as powerful as the system from over the weekend, but officials are warning that additional flooding could occur. We'll be back with more after this. Well, we thank you for joining us. A nor'easter headed for the Northeast and New England. Tomorrow we'll take a look at its impacts. I'm meteorologist Brian Vandegraff. Make it a great Monday, and we'll see you back here again tomorrow.